So in this video, we will build the big picture framework for understanding derivatives, and the concepts introduced over here will be explored in much greater detail in the lessons that follow. With that said, let's get started. So there are several ways to classify derivatives. One approach is to classify them by market or by the payoff as a function of the underlying. Based on the market, derivatives are divided into exchange-traded derivatives or over-the-counter derivatives. Based on their payoff, derivatives are divided into linear derivatives and non-linear derivatives. The most representative linear derivatives are futures and forwards. And what this means is that the payoff at a future time is linearly dependent on the value of the underlying. Now, the most representative nonlinear derivatives are, of course, options. And what this means is that the payoff at a future time is non-linearly dependent on the value of the underlying. And to understand this concept, I want you to visually memorize the payoff diagrams for both options and futures/forwards. The upper part of this diagram represents long positions, while the lower part represents short positions. And as a visual aid, think of the option payoff diagrams as resembling a kite. All of these will be covered in much greater detail in later lessons. So for the time being, all I want you to observe from these diagrams is that in the case of options, we can see that these are kinked lines. And this kink is exactly what is meant by non-linearity. In contrast, if we look at the payoff diagrams for futures, we can observe that these are straight lines. And this is exactly what it's meant by linearity. Now, to keep things organized, let's classify these derivatives by cost and market by having the cost on the vertical axis and the type of market on the horizontal axis. In the low-cost quadrant, we have futures as exchange-traded instruments and forwards as over-the-counter instruments. In the high-cost quadrant, we have options, which can be either exchange-traded or over-the-counter. For example, public equity options or stock index options are generally exchange-traded, while forex or exotic options are over-the-counter instruments. And what's important to understand from a testability perspective is that the high-cost quadrant generally refers to instruments that require an upfront premium, but in return they provide flexibility because the holder has the right, but not the obligation, to exercise the contract. By contrast, the low-cost category refers to instruments that have no upfront premium required. However, these come with commitment, meaning that both parties are obliged to honor the contract. Now, in this chapter, it is mostly options, futures, and forwards in the spotlight. However, from a broader exam perspective, it's important to know where some other derivatives fit within this framework. And just as a high-level illustration, swaptions would fall over here, while swaps over here.